So now we're up to Daf Nun Vav Amid Beis. The last three words on Amid Aleph. Chal Yom Echad. If there's a day in between the Mishmeres that now is coming in and the Shabbos, is then Mara says that according to Rabbi Yehuda, the Mishmeres that's now coming in will get 7 chalas, and the Mishmeres HaYotzes gets only 5 chalas. Ani tarte maya v'nitayu. In other words, why should they get paid just because they're the incoming Mishmeres? Give them extra chalas. Rabbi Yitzchak b'schara gofas dalsos. The Mishmeres HaNichneses has extra work to do. And what is that? After Shabbos, the Mishmeres HaYotzes is already off duty. And the Mishmeres HaNichneses is still on duty. They started their duty yesterday on Shabbos. Now it's Motzei Shabbos. They will have to lock the doors of the Beis HaMikdash so that it shouldn't be open overnight. So in payment, so to speak, and recognition of their extra work, then the Mishmeres HaNichneses gets extra chalas in the divvying up of the challah. The Meiri is very unhappy with this Gemara because he says, wait a second, the Mishmeres HaYotzes was also locking the gates for a whole week. And now the Mishmeres HaNichneses will lock the gates for a whole week. I mean, why should the Mishmeres HaNichneses deserve any extra gift here? He says that there's also something called psichos hadlos. The Gama Mishmeres HaNichneses ishtate b'psichas hadlos. Shamishmar Nichnes is dares above his man psichas hadlos. There's a whole new twist to this Gemara. He's saying that even though Shabbos morning it was the responsibility of Mishmeres HaYotzes to open up the gates, nevertheless the Mishmeres HaNichneses would come early to participate in the opening of the gates. Now, you should know that generally speaking, who opened up the gates? It was the Levium, not the Kohen. However, there were many, many gates to the Mikdash, and on 3 different locations surrounding the Mikdash, the Kohanim were in charge of opening the gates in the morning and closing the gates at night. And all this is based on Mishnayos and Masechet Midos that go through the location of all the gates and so. Now the Gemara says, I don't understand, Rabbi Yehuda, this whole takana, that because the Mishmeres HaNichneses is doing some extra work, bizrizus, they get extra chalas. Namely, why shouldn't the Mishmeres HaYotzes say to the Mishmeres HaNichneses, dal v'dal? Why are you taking 7 chalas? Take 6 chalas. And next week, when you finish your tour of duty, you'll also take 6 chalas. Because otherwise, according to Takana Rabbi Yehuda, when you finish your tour of duty, how many chalas are you going to get? Only 5. So you can get 7 this week when you start your mishmeres, and another 5 at the end, next Shabbos, when you finish your tour of duty. It's only 12. At the end, it's only 12 chalas. 7 plus 5 is always 12. So you might as well take 6 this week and 6 next week. Omar Abaye, he gives a mashal, an idiomatic phrase, botzinu tava mikara. And botzina is what's called a dalas, right? How do you say it in English? A gourd, yeah. Right? So it's a very large gourd. And if a person offers you a botzina means a small gourd, tava, that's better than kara. Kara is a full-grown, a fat gourd. In other words, basically, take what you can now because you don't know what's going to be tomorrow. And let's say if I promise you, if you wait another week, I'll give you a larger gourd. So maybe I'll change my mind in the middle, or maybe you won't be in the mood to eat a gourd. Right now, chaparai, take this small gourd. And therefore, if Rabbi Yehuda's takana was that the Kohanim this week, the Mishmeres HaNichneses, could achieve 7 challahs, take the 7 challahs, and next week you'll get only 5. I mean, the Mefarshim here are wondering. I mean, in the case of the gourd, he may change his mind. Now he's offering you, a week later, but maybe he'll change his mind during that week. So you might as well take what you can get. But in the case of lechem aponim, I mean, nobody's changing their minds over it. But nevertheless, maybe he won't be in the mood. Maybe he won't be around. Maybe he'll get sick. I don't know what. Take what you can get right now. Amar Rabbi Yehuda ben Musafim. Musafim means the oros, the hides of the karbonos of the Musafim Shabbos Cholkiv. They divided up like the lechem aponim equally amongst all the Kohanim. Again, we're talking on Shabbos, when Shabbos coincides with the Regel. And there's a long Rashi here, Dibra Maskal Haitana. I'll just read one line in the Rashi because we're really pressed for time. Inu nami mahafti bahu b'tzidora ala mizbeach. And the question is, Bishleim in the Lechem Aponim, Rashi is asking, the Mishmeres HaNichneses participates in Agafas Adlosses. And therefore we gave them some chupar, some extra gift. But in the case of Oros, in the Karban Musaf, what did the Mishmeres HaNichneses do? So Rashi gives an answer that even though the Mishmeres HaYotzeis put the Karban on the Mizbeach, but it was the Mishmeres HaNichneses who took over the job of supervising to make sure that the meat of the Karban was burnt properly. They would have to turn it over and over, upside down and inside out. Meisvei b'Gemara Succah. We learned in a Brisa. Mishmeres HaYotzeis ose tamid shel shachar umusafim. So when you finish your tour of duty on Shabbos, you get the morning responsibility. That includes tamid shel shachar and the musafim. Now comes in the second group, the Mishmeres HaNichneses, the changing of the guard. Ose tamid shel ben arbayim bazichin. They have to do the tamid shel ben arbayim and the bazichin. Bazichin were those spoons of frankincense that were placed on the mizbeach, on the shulchan, right after the lechem aponim was removed. They would remove the bazichin and then they would burn the frankincense on the mizbeach. The ilu musafim cholkim lo pitani. I don't get it. According to Rabbi Yehuda, that the Mishmeres HaNichneses also gets part of the musafim, the oros, the hides. Why wasn't that mentioned in the Mishnah? And the Gemara defends Rabbi Yehuda and says, Haitana, the Tana of this Mishnah, this Brisa, is B'chaluka lo kamayri. He wasn't talking at all about the divvying it up. And therefore, you cannot prove anything against Rabbi Yehuda. Omar Rava, Haitana today, Shmuel, but what are you going to do with the following Brisa that definitely mentions Chaluka? The Mayri b'Chaluka. And what is the Brisa? The Musaf Kol Kim Lo Ketani, and yet it omits the Chaluka of the Musafim. The Tana today, Shmuel, Mishmara Hayotzeis Osa Tamid Shel Shachar Umusafim Mishmeres HaNichneses Osa Tamid Shel Ben Arbayim B'Zichim, word for word what we saw in the previous Brisa. But this Brisa continues and says, Arba Kohanim Hayu Nichnasim L'Sham. 4 Kohanim went into the Azara. Shnayim Mishmar Zu. 2 Kohanim representing the Yotzei, the Mishmar Yotzeis, and 2 representing the Mishmar HaNichneses. V'cholkim Lechem Aponim. And they would divide up the lechem aponim amongst themselves. So this Brisa is clearly addressing the issue of chalukah, and it makes no mention of the karban musaf. The ilu mutzafim cholkim lo kedani tiyufta Rabbi Yehuda tiyufta, and ichnasim cholkim bat safon vayotzim bat dora. Tan rabbanan ichnasim cholkim bat safon. That's more chashiv. They sheyiru shehem nichnasim. It should be obvious to everyone that they are the Mishmeres HaNichneses. By Yotzim, those who are going out, they finish their tour of duty. Cholkim Badon K'nei Sheyiru Shem Yotzim. Bilga, Liolam Cholekes B'Dora. And we said the Tabas for Shchita was Kvua, and the Chalona for the Sakinim, the Chalif, was Stuma, because they were penalized. Says the Gemara Tan Rabbanan, what were they penalized? Why were they penalized? Ma'aseh Miriam Bas Bilga She was one of the daughters of Mishmeres Bilga, of this Bilga family, Shehimira Dasa. And she converted to another religion, and she went and got married, one of the officers in the Greek. This is in the period of Baisheni when the Greeks were attacking the Jews, persecuting the Jews, religious persecution, taking over the Beis Hamikdash and defiling the Beis Hamikdash. And she married an officer in the court of Yavan, of the enemy, the Hellenists. Now, when they came into the Heichal during Bayeshen, in order to defile it, she came in as well. This former Jewish woman from a mishpacha of Mishmeres Cohen. She took off her sandal and she started hitting the Mizbeach. The Aron, she yelled, Lucas, Lucas. That's Greek for a wolf. A wolf is always an animal that attacks. And you, the Mizbeach, are an attacker. You're taking the food out of the mouth of my former people, right? People in your nation are spending endless amount of money for karbanos, and you're consuming all that money. And what have you done, Mizbeach, during their period of tchak? Look at the oppression, look at the Yevanim. We are entering into your mikdash and defiling. The Mepharshim say this is after the Hashmonaim won the victory against the Greeks, and they heard about it. Then kavu es tabata besasmu es halona. Then they instituted all these punitive measures against the Mishmeres of Bilga. Now the Gemara is going to ask, why is the Mishmeres of Bilga guilty? Because of this one daughter from the Mishmeres. And Rav Moshe Feinstein has a different question over here. He doesn't understand, why they made such a big deal about what she said at the Mizbeach. I mean, the fact that she left the fold and she married a guy from Yevanim. I mean, that didn't bother the Chachamim. And again, Rav Moshe comes to a radical conclusion that Bizoyim Kodshim is worse than Hamoras Hadas. But other Mepharshim say that the Gemara is trying to explain why the Mishmeres itself was guilty, and they can't be held responsible for the fact that she went ahead and married a guy, etc. Yes, Omrim. Another opinion has it that Mishmarta, that this was a punishment for the whole Mishmeres. Why? Shoha Lava. They came late on Shabbos. They slept late on Shabbos. You ever hear such a thing? Anyone who would sleep late on Shabbos? This Mishmer slept late of Shabbos, and it proved that they were Mavaza the Kodshim. I mean, even though they were on duty, they didn't show up on time. Then what happened? The Nichnas, Yishayev Ech Achiv. Achiv means another from a different family of Kohanim that came in and took over, Imo, V'shimeshtach. And they served in place of this Mishmeres because it was 10 o'clock. Yeah, I was in Leningrad once on Shabbos, and I davened in Lubavitch. And it was 11 o'clock before they started Shabbos. So I said, hey guys, what's going on here? So they told me the earliest time you can daven in Leningrad in the winters is 11 o'clock. The sun doesn't come out until 11 o'clock. What do you want from our lives? Anyway, the Afal Pisha Shchene Harashoim Lo Nistakru Shchene Bilga Nistakru. Normally, we say that those who are, bordering on the sinners, they are neighbors. They don't get much out of it. Here, this neighbor by the name of Yeshava, that mishpar, they got paid for. Shebilga liolam cholekes b'dar Yeshava b'tzafa. They always divvied up whatever lechem aponim to Yeshovev on the northern side. They gave him chashivas and recognition of the fact that they took over for those who delayed, and so forth and so on. I understand very well that the Mishmeres itself should be penalized in those three ways that we discussed earlier, because they're they were late on Shabbos. I mean, why didn't they show up on time for duty in the Beis Hamikdash? Is hiding the Kansinon L'Kula Mishma. But according to the first opinion, the version of Miriam Bas Bilga Shebira Dasa, Shum Barte Kansinon Leila Dite. Now we're going back to her father. We should penalize her father because she left the fold, etc., etc. Rabbi yes, we penalize the father. Why? I'll quote to you an idiomatic phrase that's popular. Shusa dianuka b'shuka o diavua o deime. When you hear a child speaking in the, out in the marketplace, in public, and you hear the child using such strange language, you know that the child heard it from either his father or his mother. But the Gemara says, okay, that would maybe point a finger of guilt at the parents, but now you're blaming and penalizing the entire Mishmeres, made up of many, many Kohen. I mean, why are they guilty of sin? The Mishmeres itself is considered Shchenim of this family of the daughter of Bilga, and therefore they also deserve a Knas. Apparently, the Gemara thinks that a shochet is also somewhat responsible for the actions or the misdemeanors of neighbors. Now, the Marsha says that Gemara added the following line and a half because they didn't want to end the Masechet with this terrible story about Bas Bilga. They wanted to end the Masechet on the right foot, not on the left foot. And the Gemara says, based on a pasuk Yeshayahu Hanavi, Tov l'tzadik, Tov l'shcheno. No, this is not a pasuk. I'm sorry. If I called it a pasuk, I made a mistake. Tov l'tzadik, Tov l'shcheno is the flip side of oil Rasha, oil l'shcheno, that it's good for the neighbors, and they'll benefit from the fact that they're neighbors of a tzaddik. And Nemar, because it says in Yeshayahu Hanavi, Imru tzaddik ki tov. And notice that the word tzaddik is in the singular. Ki pri ma'alaleim yochelu. And their ma'alaleim, their children, now it's in the plural, will eat the benefits of the tov, the good of the tzaddik. So Pasach b'loshen yochid, it opens the word tzaddik, u'v'sayim b'loshen rab and pri ma'alechem. And the mashmos, it's teaching us that kishat tzaddik osem maisim tovim, is then others around them will benefit. Hadron alecha perak acholil uslikole mesechta Succah. And now we begin a new mesechta, Beitza Shenolda B'Yontif, Machlokes Beisil Beit Shammai, and that will be neder. We'll pick up tomorrow. Thank you very much. Thank you all who participated at Mazel Tov. K'shem Chesiyam Mesechta Succah came Nizker Lahastil Ulasayim Harbe Mesechta. Amen.